But when money's really, really tight, the climate policy feels just less urgent in the moment, right?
and isn't in the language of the everyday person.
Saying these are the things that we need to work toward, a better future climate wise. And people are just like, I don't have the capacity to participate in this.
Slew of influencers screaming on your Instagram or your TikTok saying there's this new research, that new research, and you don't quite know who to trust anymore.
Welcome to the Spin Nation podcast. Today, we're going to environmental and green narratives. And to help us talk about what this means in Canada, we have a very special guest, my friend Randi Ramdeen. Hi, Randy. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Those who don't know Randy, you are missing out. Randi is a committed Green Party candidate and climate advocate who has run multiple times in both urban and rural ridings. So, Randi, as you know, here on the Spin Nation podcast, we really dig into the narratives that are trying to influence Canadians. We found that the narrative around green and environmentalism and climate just was not as strong as it used to be. Like, Randi, is there anything that sticks out for you that you think that trend is continuing? Is it changing?
Because I've run in both rural and urban ridings, every community is different. But what I hear consistently is the rising cost of living. Grocery prices, heating, cost of gas is what people are concerned about. I don't think that people don't care about the environment, but when money's really, really tight, climate policy feels just less urgent in the moment, right? We need to take these actions for the future, and that's true, but it's hard when you're in survival mode to focus on these things when you're literally worried about whether I can keep my house warmer or buy groceries. And what that tells me is that to prioritize climate action, we need to be able to connect the rising cost of living with how climate impacts that. So I think that tying that message in will help it resonate with people and help people think more about it for the future.
Is that why you think, for example, like EVs haven't been adopted as readily here as they have in other countries because it's just seen as an additional expense?
Absolutely. I grew up in a small town, and I don't know anyone who has the amount of money that it costs to buy like a Tesla, for example. I know there are other options, but it's a big upfront cost for a lot of people who just don't have it.
So I think there was a significant shift in narrative, and it became less of a priority somewhere along 2023, 2024, even before the Trump election. And my suspicion is that after COP26, everybody was really happy and celebrating the wins at the time. And we kind of, okay, now it's time for the policy people, the regulators to take this file and then turn this momentum into action. And I think this is where we lost the momentum. It became very much a regulatory conversation where people were talking about, okay, how do we deal with scope 2 emissions, scope 3 emissions? Very wonky conversation and isn't in the language of the everyday person. And to your point, Randy, the everyday person started worrying about how do I feed my children when cost of beef is going up or the cost of heating is going up, and that's where the momentum was lost.
Yeah, I also think we need to take into consideration, what's happened in the last 5 to 6 years with, the pandemic and exhaustion. We saw the Russian-Ukrainian war. We saw women life freedom in Iran, rising inflation. And boy, that's a lot,
Yeah.
we were overwhelmed by the amount of things happening in the world. And I think that most people want to do the right thing. And so when we're coming to people saying these are the things that we need to do to work toward, a better future climate wise, it's too much, and people are just like, I don't have the capacity to participate in this. I just think that we are forgetting about how overwhelmed we've been with the information that we receive. I think a lot of people are afraid to make mistakes, and they don't want to necessarily participate in conversations where they can be the subject to criticism if they don't know. I think that there's a lot of things to consider when it comes to the conversations veering away from climate action because of what we've seen in the world.
Hmm. And I take your point. Like, if we go back to the world of traditional media, in a lot of ways, you selected your gatekeeper, whether it was the Toronto Star or the National Post, and that helps filter out and I wouldn't say quite make decisions for you, but at least guide you to a certain set of values that you've agreed and shared, and that reduced the decision load, like how many times you need to decide on issue X, Y, and Z, and that's disappeared, especially in the last few years. You get a slew of influencers screaming on your Instagram or your TikTok saying there's this new research, that new research, and you don't quite know who to trust anymore.
Exactly, exactly. And algorithms are good, but they also protect us from hearing other perspectives, right? Like they feed us the information that we want to hear instead of opening us up to listening to other experiences. Because what I experience here in the West is different from what other people experience across the world, right? There are different types of environmental impacts depending on where you are on the globe. So I think it's important to be curious about what happens outside of our own algorithms.
So, who are the climate and environmental influencers, like even that you go to? Because back in the day, it was obviously David Suzuki, and I mean he's still out there. Bless him. But who do you turn to? And then I'm curious to your point around we don't hear the other side. Do you actively seek out the climate naysayers to understand what their perspective? Because you might face those people at the door when you go
Absolutely.
canvassing.
Yeah, one of the first influencers for me was Elizabeth May as a Green. I just aligned so well with what she had to say, specifically in the 2008 debates. And then I did my own research, but Naomi Klein, David Attenborough. But I think younger people are listening to more, social media influencers, Greta Thunberg, Autumn Peltier, or going to sources like, 350.org. But with regards to the other side, yeah, I definitely try to listen because at the end of the day, we're all living in the same country. We're all trying to create the kind of life that we had as kids for our kids to be able to go outside and play without the threat of breathing apparatuses when there's too much smoke from forest fires and pollution from industries or companies. And so I do try to listen to people who support the industries that are maybe not the best for the environment. And I try to listen to them in the sense that they're worried about their security, right? They're
Mhm.
worried about being able to maintain a job to continue to feed their kids. And we decide we don't want to invest in that anymore. What happens to them? Um, there are options, but I think that people first and foremost need to hear the concerns of the other side and be able to understand, oh, these people they just want a secure future as well.
Do you think that Trudeau and now we have Carney, do you think they missed the opportunity? So obviously Trudeau had much more green and climate forward policies. And he was not investing as much in the pipelines. He had the carbon taxes it put in place. Now the sentiment has shifted. So especially after the last federal election, yes, people were talking climate. It was up about 1,200% in Q1 2025, according to our data. But the economy, to your point, was up 3,000%. Do you think if the government had been better at what you're saying, where like if you're taking away jobs and opportunities from oil, you need to replace it with something else? And to my mind, they didn't replace it. They talked about green tech in these big, vague terms, but nothing ever materialized for Alberta or even BC, which is also heavy in natural resources and forestry. If we're not going to pursue these sectors, which are huge GDP drivers, they never really gave any options to people. And now it's become we need to invest in pipelines again.
Yeah, and I think that it was a missed opportunity, And the Greens have been talking about this for at least 10 years, because I talked about it 10 years ago, which was investing in retraining people, right? Retraining people for renewable energy, for those jobs, to transition them. Like, I know there is always going to be people who it's harder to do that training, but we have to start somewhere. People are talking more about, pipelines. It's because in last February, Trump, he increased the tariffs. And so it became a matter of security again, right? For some people. So I think that the supporters of the pipelines, they understand that it veers us away from relying on the US. We can make deals with other partners. It creates jobs. Obviously, it brings money in. And I think that what people don't realize is when we're building pipelines, we are then like overloading local communities with stuff like housing. So people who are working on these pipelines need to live in these communities, and it drives up costs. It puts a strain on local healthcare as well. So my wait time is going to go up from an hour to like 8 hours based on the amount of people who have come in, right? Like, I think it's going to ebb and flow, the investment in pipelines, or depending on what's happening again in the world. But we also need to recognize that there are pros and cons to it. For example, Indigenous communities, it affects Indigenous communities, especially land defenders who are protesting. These are people that we really want to show that we support their decision making and agency. And we making these deals without consultation or agreement is eroding trust. I think that's a big part of the conversation is, who has felt mistrust or distrust in the government.
And I think there's a narrative as well. I was reading that Alberta has tripled its output, but the actual number of jobs related to oil and gas is actually down by a couple digits. So it's not necessarily always build pipelines or build oil wells and the jobs will follow. That hasn't this isn't as true as it used to be.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, it's yes, we will make money, but at what cost, right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
And I think there's a narrative as well. Like everyone, whichever side of the spectrum you sit on, I think everyone wants nice green parks and clean air and fewer chemicals in the air and in the food they consume. So it might be, I go back to my original point, simpler messaging that aligns a lot of everyday people as something that makes a difference in their life.
Yeah, absolutely. And investing in local communities is I think, a big part. And I think at the end of the day, it's just finding the solutions that can help people transition in a way that's manageable and that shows them that we want them to succeed. And
So, Carney, before he was prime minister, I mean, he actually was quite a strong global voice for net zero. He led this net zero banking alliance. For those who aren't familiar, was around moving the money to decarbonize. So, at the end of the day, what gets built depends on where the money's going to go. So, banks signed up to say they were going to stop putting their money in quote unquote dirty industries. Now, that whole net zero banking alliance is kaputski now. It's gone. When he became prime minister, though, were you kind of hopeful that maybe, okay, Trudeau was pro climate? Carney historically seemed to be on the side of net zero. Were you hopeful? And where is that hope gone now that he's here?
background gave me some hope with, that in the sense that he understood climate risks. And I'm always hopeful when there's a change in leadership. I think that, it's dangerous to keep people in power indefinitely. At the end of the day, like I said, is that I really think that people in general are in this for the right reasons, which is to to be a conduit for the voices they represent for their constituents. And, at the end of the day, I don't think anyone wants to be known as the worst prime minister we've ever had. I wouldn't want to be prime minister because there's a lot of pressures and, you have to make decisions that aren't going to appease everyone. But I think that like some of the policies of like incentivizing Canadians, like tax credits and sustainable housing are smart right now. And so, I want to have faith in what he can achieve in the capacity that he has. But I think the Greens are also in a good position to continue to hold people accountable, right? To continue to push for green initiatives. I will always try to have as much hope as I can that people want to create a better future. I don't necessarily always agree with the steps we take to get there, but that's why we have diverse voices, and that's why we have government accountability as well, and community accountability. Like,
Are you planning on running if there's an election called?
absolutely, I will put my name up as many times as possible. I think it comes down to when you're going door to door, being able to relate all these issues together, right? So if we, change the way we're investing in, certain things, it's going to lower the cost of insurance and gas. So I think linking those things when you're talking to people and having those one-on-one conversations, it's like, yeah, I hear you. I'm feeling these effects as well. And I understand your concerns. And here is how all of these things are related. And it doesn't sound to me like you're against these things. What it sounds like is you are for these things. And it just is a matter of how they are adopted and how they are perceived.
All right. Well, this has been so great. So I'm really happy that you came on to chat with us today, Randi. We, of course, hope to see you sitting in the ledge at some point in the future.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.